I'm starting out today with a personal story that's relevant to our topic. It's a little hard for me to talk about because it's not something that I typically share. However, I think it's just really important for those of you watching in the audience who will be able to relate to my story and kind of the creating an identity around pain and our victim status. As I've shared in some other episodes, I had a pretty rough and traumatic childhood growing up, and it left me with a lot of pain. A lot of pain. And by the time I was 13, I was already really suicidal and depressed and just hating my life and just wanting to get out of high school as fast as possible. And, despite all of my therapy and a lot of the things that I was trying to do to make myself feel better, it still wasn't enough. And really it was because I had made an identity for myself out of pain, out of that suffering, out of that victim status, because that's kind of what life had taught me. What was inside of me? A lot of pain, a lot of pain. And it wasn't until some more traumatic events happened in my adulthood, mainly the sudden death of my mom, that really kind of shook me out of that. That and a couple other events, which were also pretty intense, they allowed me to have what's called a dark night of the soul. And that was part of my spiritual awakening process. And I had to go really deep because I was just in so much pain. My life was falling apart in all of these different ways. And what was left? All of that pain and suffering still. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Because I was really at a very, very, very low point in my life. And I realized I could keep feeling pain and I could keep suffering and keep playing the victim, or there was something beyond that. What was beyond it? I didn't know. I didn't have any idea what was going to happen when I disidentified from that pain and suffering, because it felt like an impossible thing. What was on the other side? Was it happiness? I couldn't even imagine what a really happy and fulfilling life was, because I was just in so much pain. It felt like doing the impossible. But I stepped through that threshold and I got to the other side and I was like, oh, this is where I am. That pain and that suffering, that wasn't really me. I'm something much deeper than that. I'm a soul and a human body here to do a certain type of work and here to be on a certain path. And I wasn't all of that negative stuff. And it was incredibly liberating. And now I'm not saying the pain and suffering went away. I had to work through it little by little over the coming years, and it's been a process. But making that jump was huge. So for you all watching in the audience who might be really identified with your pain and your victim status and can't imagine a good life for yourself, it's going to be okay. Really. Having this information that I'm going to be going throughout this show is really helpful. And I know because, God is good and God is really taking care of everyone, that you'll get past this too. And we all have our own journey to go on. So thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Jessica Disbrow, licensed social worker and registered psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. I'm also the founder and primary therapist of Higher Consciousness Healing. We offer innovative mental health services in Lakewood, Colorado. We also do community building, free online education, individual and group therapy, and we specialize working with youth and millennials. We also have our live video blog, which you're watching right now, where we talk about different mental health topics from a spiritual and scientific perspective. We air the show every week at 10 a.m. on Mountain Time, Saturdays. and welcome to the show. Please, if you do have questions and comments, definitely ask them during the show. I'll answer them if I can. There's a little bit of a delay on Facebook, so definitely shoot out those questions and comments. All right. Last week, we talked about compassionate, nonviolent communication strategies. But how can we communicate when we don't have a lot of awareness around our emotions, never mind even a good vocab to talk about them? So let's dive in, because emotions can be really powerful tools when used correctly. But so many of us have emotional issues. That's just the case. A lot of us get triggered and have like really intense, extreme reactions to things. A lot of us feel we can't trust our emotions, that they've misguided us in the past. And then a lot of us try and escape from our emotions. Because they're so intense, we self-medicate with different drugs, alcohol, anything to make us feel better because we feel so terrible. Well, why are so many of us lacking in our emotional regulation skills and our ability to control our emotions and really understand where they're coming from, why they're happening, and what we can do about them? It always goes back to those early childhood experiences. It really, really does. Our parents, ideally, are there to support us and love us and take care of our needs, especially when we're infants, when we're very, very young. And ideally what happens is first the parent soothes the child when the child is upset. So kid's crying, parent says that's okay, and helps to soothe the child. So that's the first step, is parent teaching the child to soothe. And then it goes from there for the parent teaching the child how to self-soothe. Now this usually doesn't happen because many parents don't even know how to soothe themselves around their emotions. So how can they teach their very small infant and toddlers to breathe and not just freak out all the time? Most people, I see it a lot. A lot of people like yell and scream at their children and say, stop that, stop that. And what that teaches the kid is, I can't express my emotions. These are bad. I'm being yelled at, so now I'm going to internalize and I'm going to stop feeling those feelings and I'm going to push them down. And that's not helpful, right? Because it's a recipe for dysfunction around our ability to regulate our emotions and to self-soothe. And we're learning this at a very early age. On top of this, if our parents weren't able to emotionally regulate as well, and we're kids and we're seeing them act out and we're seeing them fight with their partners and get upset and exhibit all these really extreme emotions, well, that's what we learn. And instead of having a whole symphony of beautiful emotions with lots of different nuances and complexities, we have like a bugle. And it only plays a couple notes, and they're usually pretty extreme. Well, it's not helpful, because we play this out throughout our adulthood. On top of this, to make matters worse, right? We're living in a society that really doesn't value emotions or emotional expression. So we're really taught, again, that expressing our emotions isn't good and that we should, hide them. And of course, this is especially true for men more than women. However, I do think across the board, that's what we're taught as children and as adults. So, I want to go back to the story that I started with around identification with pain and victim status, because this is something that's really, really normal. And a lot of times it's because we've experienced trauma, we've experienced hardships and challenges, or our parents have, and now they're still acting that out. And so we then act that out, even if we haven't directly experienced trauma. Right? Not the most helpful. Now, why would we make an identity for ourselves out of pain? Well, it's actually because there's no real identity center of our brain. Like, there's not a place in our brain that holds our identity and our personality. That's actually not true at all. So our mind, our ego, tries to create one for us because our ego mind doesn't realize that we have a soul because it's not really connected to that. It kind of makes an identity for itself out of this pain and victimhood. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, he calls this the pain body, and we really get identified with it. And it feels impossible to be anything else because a lot of us, that's all we've ever been. So how do we move past that? Well, it's really important to remember that you're not your thoughts, your emotions, or your actions. You know, those, I should really say your reactions, because those are programmed things that we have that we don't necessarily have that much control over. You know, and until we build that awareness in the present moment, we're just kind of like robots on a program repeating what we learned without a lot of awareness. And it's a really terrible state to be in. I mean, I know for my personal self, it wasn't fun. You know, we have to remember your divine conscious energy. And that's beautiful. So we just have to get past all of that pain and suffering and negative emotions to find the good stuff. I was at a transformative festival over this past, or I guess last year, over the summer, and someone came up to me and they asked me, "Do you meditate or medicate?" I was like, wow, that's a really good way to put it, you know, because so many of us have these emotions that we're trying to cope with, and a lot of us choose medication in some form or fashion, and some of us choose meditation instead. And I really think the latter is a really awesome tool because it allows you to be regulating yourself and not having something else regulating you, like a medication or a drug, or again with that wanting to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. Harmful for us in the short term and the long term. So how do we build that present moment awareness? Well, it's being present in our body, mind, and what's outside of us. By being present and building those mindfulness skills that I talked about in episode 3, we can then start to notice what our triggers are. Because sometimes we're triggered and we don't even know what caused it. And so it's hard to find a solution to something that we don't fully understand and recognize when we're going 0 to 60 and we're just flying off the handlebars. So building that awareness, you'll start to understand those better, and you'll start to have a better understanding of those different levels of emotions and those subtleties, because they are there, and especially in the body. Our body is like such a good tool for us to use to tap into what we need and where we're at. And when we close our eyes and we breathe and we're with those emotions, we can better understand them and we can better learn how to control them. But without that awareness, we're just repeating and we're just playing out those patterns and extreme emotions. Now, I've had this conversation with quite a few people around negative emotions and pain. And from my perspective, I'm like, we don't need that pain. We don't really need those negative emotions in the way that a lot of us feel like we do. And now, I think after a lot of thinking and processing with myself and with clients and people in my life, I've come to realize, like, the negative emotions, they're okay. They're not something that we need to avoid and be like, okay, I just no longer want to have negative emotions or pain. The problem with all of this, it's not the emotions itself, it's our attachment to them. So So ideally, it's okay to feel those negative emotions. They actually tell us a lot about what's going on. You know, if we're upset or stressed in the moment, there's a reason that we need to address, right? So feeling them, processing them, figuring out where they're coming from, what they're about, and then letting them go. So we don't become the emotions. And that's the problem. It's that becoming, it's that identification with that pain and negative emotions. You know, I'm mad. No, you're not mad. You're feeling mad, but you're not mad itself. You know what I mean? And it's a really important thing to recognize and start to build awareness around. Because if we're always stressed, if we're always feeling these negative emotions, guess what? They're having a really big toll on us in ways that we probably don't even fully understand. Short term and long term. Specifically, our health. So what was happening with me during my life, really identifying with this pain and really feeling like it was me, well, I developed an autoimmune condition. Yep, in my 20s, and had to deal with all of that because I was just in so much pain. My body was literally attacking itself. So there's some serious health consequences to all of this because our body is always stressed out and we can't ever calm down. So it's really, really messy. On top of all of the problematic things it brings to our life and our relationships and ourselves. So, I have a book recommendation. Now, I don't normally recommend books that I haven't fully read. However, I have read another one of her books and I think she's wonderful. And I've paged through this one. I just got it in the mail the other day, of course, very serendipitous. And I wanted to share it all with you in case you were interested, because it does go into our emotional self in a spiritual way too, and I think that can be really helpful, and that's what we talk about on this show. So it's called Emotional Freedom by Judith Orloff. And it says, liberate yourself from negative emotions and transform your life. This book will help you understand your emotional type and your core strengths, understanding the toll that our negative emotions are having on our physical and spiritual health, protecting ourselves from people who drain our energy and who are really negative and stressful, and transforming that negativity into courage, patience, connection, inner calm, hope, self-esteem, and compassion. Sounds really awesome. I'm excited to dive deeper into this book. I feel like it would be really helpful for a lot of you in the audience, so I wanted to recommend it, even though I don't normally do that with books I haven't read, you know. But that one looks like serious quality. So please check it out if you want to dive more into your emotions and better understanding them. I definitely recommend that. All right. Next week, we're going to be talking more about breathing techniques. As I want to really flesh those out, I have a few different suggestions on different types of breathing. And I feel that building that awareness really starts with the breath in the present moment, because there's so much going on. And if we can just become more aware of our breath and our anxiety in our body and that stress, we can start to really unravel these bigger, deeper emotional knots that a lot of us have at the core. So check that out next week. And if you have any questions or comments about this show, please, this is your last chance. I have a couple announcements. If you're just tuning in and you're not really that familiar with the show, welcome. We have a New Year's challenge going on for the month of January. So every day I'm re-airing one of my episodes. So on January 1st, we started with the first episode. Second, we went with the second episode, and so on. And it's not too late to catch up. So if you want to watch all of the show, it really, they really do follow in chronological order and make sense to watch it from like start to finish. I mean, you can pop in on different shows as they interest you, and the show is also created for that purpose as well. But I believe that the audience will get a lot more out of it when we watch it back to back. So great time to catch up. January, it's dark, people are kind of like in a hibernating mode, so maybe you want to catch up with some of these. Two more things. We have our spiritual support group for millennials happening on Thursday, January 11th. We are meeting at the Full Moon Books and Event Center. We moved locations, have a bigger space, and I'm really jazzed to continue that group. We're going to be talking about love and fear this month. Also, we have a group therapy program coming up for millennials. It's 12 weeks. We go into so many awesome things about trust and love and safety and a lot of things I'm talking about on the show. And you'll get in-depth information, resources, and then the group therapy process, which can be really transformative. So definitely check that out. I have more information about that on the Higher Consciousness Healing website. Just go to the For Millennials page and you can read about it there. Awesome. All right, thank you for the comment. I don't see any questions. Just to thank you for doing the show, and thank you so much for watching in the audience. Like, this stuff is hard and we tend to avoid it. We really, really do. A lot of us have all sorts of resistance around these topics, and thank you for watching and opening your mind to these important things. All right, I'll see you next week. Looking forward to it. Take care.